Okay, so usually when we sit down to do a deep dive, we're looking at something um, manageable. You
Right,
know,
like a historical event where the dust has settled.
yeah, exactly. Or like the future of a specific tech, something where we can look at it with some distance. But today is just different.
Definitely the darkest stack of research we've ever had to go through. And honestly, probably the most complex.
Yeah, we are diving into the Epstein files. And look, I know everyone has heard the name.
Everyone's seen the headlines.
Right. It feels like this giant dark cloud that's just been hanging over the culture for years now.
But the reason we are doing this deep dive today is because of a very specific request from a listener.
Yeah, and honestly, it's the only reason we agreed to tackle this. They didn't want us to just, rehash the
Elaborate
gossip.
tabloid stuff.
Exactly. They asked us to conduct and this is a, quote, bureaucratic level debate.
Which is such a smart way to approach it, because they want to move beyond the sensationalism and look at this as a masterclass in institutional failure.
Right. They want the unfiltered truth of how the system broke down. So we aren't just looking at a true crime story today. We're dissecting how elite power structures defensively protect themselves.
And what the actual raw evidence reveals about the machinery behind the scenes.
So we need to clarify right at the top what we mean when we say the files.
Because there is a massive misconception out there.
Oh, totally. People think there's just like one single binder sitting on a desk somewhere labeled the Epstein file that tells us everything.
And that is absolutely not how this works.
Well, it's a mess, right? It's not one neat PDF you can just scroll through.
It's a highly fragmented puzzle. When we say the files, we are referring to a collective, disparate stack of documents.
Light logs from the plane.
Yes, the logs. Plus the infamous Black Book of Contacts.
Right, and court depositions, both civil and criminal.
We also have evidence seized by the FBI over various raids, and crucially, the recently unsealed documents from the Ghislaine Maxwell trial.
So our mission for you today is to synthesize all of that. We've got sources ranging from visual breakdowns of the quote-unquote cursed media found in his homes to forensic email analysis.
Up to heavy academic papers on elite defensive power. We are going to separate the hard evidence from the internet speculation.
And we really need to warn you right now, we're going to discuss some incredibly disturbing things today.
Yes, we are dealing with systemic abuse, sex trafficking, and massive institutional corruption.
We're keeping it strictly factual based on our sources, but the subject matter is inherently grim. So just be aware of that going in.
The cursed media folder alone is, well, it's a lot to process.
It really is. And I want to start right there with the raw evidence.
Mhm.
Because for so long, this entire case was just rumors and whiskers.
But thanks to these leaks and the unsealed documents, we actually have visuals now.
We have detailed descriptions of videos, and some of it is just so bizarre.
Bizarre is exactly the right word. We have a source, a breakdown of the visual evidence by Trapmore Ross that details a series of videos and photos recovered by investigators.
And what really stood out to me wasn't just the sheer criminality of it, but the strange, almost ritualistic nature of the whole thing.
Yes, you're referring to the sailor suit video.
Yeah. I mean, the files describe a video showing a young girl in a sailor costume, but the context around it is what makes your skin crawl.
Because there's a bell involved.
The ring for spells bell. Or in some documents, they call it the ring for kiss bell.
Correct. The files describe this deeply unsettling scenario where a bell is rung and a specific performance happens.
And what's just fascinating, in the worst way possible, is how the investigation linked this one weird, highly specific visual detail to the broader social network.
It's a perfect example of how the mundane overlaps with the illicit. Investigators found an email chain involving a couple, Randy and Diana Wright.
Now, these were associates of Epstein, right?
Yes. In 2016, there's this email chain where Randy Wright actually shares a Flickr album.
Like the photo sharing site.
Exactly. A public or semi-public photo sharing link showcasing these exact items. The ring for spells bell and a nurse's costume.
And they were discussing them as get-well gifts.
That is what the email suggests, yes.
Wait, so they were buying these incredibly specific, disturbing props as casual gifts. Like, hey, here's a novelty bell and a costume. Hope you feel better.
Randy Wright literally writes, "So happy you love the bells in uniform. Get well soon."
That implies such a terrifying level of normalization.
Exactly. These weren't props hidden away in some secret dungeon. They were items exchanged casually between friends, logged on a normal website like Flickr.
It just shows how utterly comfortable they were with this entire dynamic. They didn't even think they needed to hide it from each other.
And there was a significant debate in the files regarding that specific sailor suit video, which highlights how crucial visual evidence is.
Right, the debate about the condition of the girl in the video.
Investigators were arguing over whether the girl in the footage was physically soaked with water or if the costume itself was just made of transparent material.
Or which, when you first read it, sounds like some weird technicality,
Yeah.
but it's actually vital.
It is vital because it matches victim testimony. A survivor named Kendall explicitly testified in her deposition that she would be soaked during these encounters.
So when investigators are scrutinizing this grainy video and see a girl who appears wet or shivering, it stops being a random detail.
It becomes hard corroboration of a highly specific modus operandi.
It grounds all the horror in stark reality. It's not just a story someone told. There's a video file sitting on a server that perfectly matches her words.
And speaking of video files, we have to adjust the dog footage mentioned in the sources.
Yeah, that really unsettled me when I was reading through the notes.
It's deeply disturbing. The files describe footage involving dogs that the defense attorneys actually tried to characterize as just jokes or pranks.
But when you look at that footage alongside the youth schedules,
The meticulous, color-coded calendars Epstein kept of exactly when young women would be arriving and departing.
right, when you combine those two things, the presence of these so-called joke clips takes on this incredibly dark undertone.
It implies a completely predatory environment where absolutely nothing was off limits and everything was treated as a game by the perpetrators.
Which brings us right into the surveillance state aspect of all this. Because we have to remember, this wasn't just some guy walking around with a camcorder.
No, this was an enterprise-level operation.
The source material shows he was recording everything. We're talking about low-resolution clips that look exactly like hidden camera feeds from inside his own personal office.
He was actively spying on his own guests and associates.
Which begs the question, why?
He was building an insurance policy. From a bureaucratic and strategic standpoint, that is the only logical conclusion.
When you are operating at that level of illicit activity with some of the most powerful people on the planet, your only real safety is mutually assured destruction.
Exactly. If the system comes for him, he has the evidence to take the entire system down with him. That is what those hidden tapes represent.
And yet he died in a federal cell. And the tapes, well, we are definitely going to get to what happened to the evidence and the system failures later.
We will dissect that thoroughly.
But before we move off the raw physical evidence, there's something in the files that I found, honestly, strangely satisfying in a really dark way.
You're referring to the medical records.
Yes, the swollen face photo.
Right. There's a photo sent to a doctor that was recovered showing Epstein with a heavily battered, swollen face.
And the internet completely lost its mind over this photo. People were saying he was beaten up in prison or it was a message from the mob or whatever.
It certainly fueled a massive amount of speculation, but the files actually reveal something much more mundane and pathetic.
A literal laundry list of health issues.
This was not the vibrant, untouchable, invincible billionaire he projected to the world.
Not at all. The medical files list drug-resistant gonorrhea, chlamydia, sleep apnea, chronic constipation.
And rather ironically, a severe allergy to cats, trees, and grass.
There is just something so deeply pathetic about that. You have this guy acting like he's a master of the universe, flying politicians around, and meanwhile, he's literally rotting from the inside out and can't even go near a tree.
It creates a very stark contrast to the mythos he spent millions building. But speaking of myths, we need to use our sources to address a very persistent rumor right now.
Oh, the imposter theory.
Yes. The internet rumor that the Ghislaine Maxwell, currently sitting in federal prison, is actually a body double.
Right, the idea that the real Ghislaine was swapped out and is currently sipping mojitos on a private beach somewhere in a non-extradition country.
It's a highly popular conspiracy theory, but one of our sources, Dr. G, who is a forensic psychologist and body language expert, debunked this completely.
They analyzed the footage, right?
They analyzed hours of footage from her historical depositions compared to her recent court appearances and prison photos.
And what's the verdict?
It is undeniably her. The forensic markers simply cannot be faked to this degree.
What kind of markers are we talking about?
She has a very specific idiosyncratic lisp on her
Not audio markers.
and visual ones. She has a distinctive sneer in her micro-expressions that flashes when she's challenged. Plus, she has a habitual body language tic where she leans slightly to the left whenever she is uncomfortable or being evasive.
So even though she's clearly aged, and maybe the lack of, high-end Botox or plastic surgery in prison, has changed her surface appearance?
The underlying biometric architecture of her behavior is absolutely identical. It is Ghislaine Maxwell.
So we can put that to bed. The system failed in a dozen different ways, which we will debate, but it did not swap her out for a clone.
No, she is serving her time.
Okay, so we've got the physical visuals, we got the costumes, the medical records, the biometric analysis, but then we dive into the emails.
And this is where the bureaucratic analysis gets incredibly dense.
Dense and weird, because my brain honestly started to hurt reading these. These people, they have to be talking in code.
It is highly probable.
Because if it's not code, then this entire network of global elites just had a deeply weird obsession with beef jerky.
The jerky correspondence is truly one of the most baffling aspects of the entire document dump.
It's everywhere. There are so many emails back and forth just frantically asking about jerky. Do we have the jerky? Francis is making the jerky. Steve's dog ate the jerky.
And the sheer volume discussed is absurd. At one point, an email mentions requiring 30 pounds of raw beef to make the necessary amount.
30 pounds of beef. And Epstein gets genuinely aggressive, like angry when this jerky isn't available.
Furthermore, he insists on freezing it.
Which makes zero sense. The entire point of beef jerky, the reason it was invented, is that it's already preserved. You don't freeze it.
That anomaly is the primary indicator that we are looking at coded language. Dr. G's analysis points out another crucial detail. A photo of this supposed jerky was originally included in the evidentiary files, but was subsequently removed or redacted.
Why on earth would the FBI redact a picture of dried meat?
Exactly. Unless jerky is a placeholder noun.
So what is it, cash? Drugs? Or tapes?
We cannot say for certain based on the raw text. But the intensity of the correspondence, the nonsensical freezing, the federal redaction, it all points to jerky representing an asset of extremely high value.
Much more valuable than a snack. And then we get to the hypocrisy email.
Yes.
This one felt like a smoking gun to me. Not necessarily about a specific crime we didn't know about, but about his actual mindset.
Yeah.
He literally wrote a manifesto to himself.
It appears to be a drafted document, or perhaps a note to self, literally titled Hypocrisy.
And it reads like a deeply twisted burn book.
It acts as a ledger. He methodically lists the sins committed by the, quote, very rich.
He lists drug use, massive tax evasion, lying to their wives.
But it gets much more specific and granular than that. He mentions people stealing from mothers, engaging in racist gang stuff.
And then there are two phrases that really jump out. Threatened to push wife downstairs and fed wife antibiotics.
Fed wife antibiotics is a highly anomalous, specific accusation.
It's so weird. And our source material actually links that specific rumor to someone, right?
Yeah. The analysis in the source's notes there has been speculation linking that phrasing to rumors regarding Bill Gates.
Though we need to be clear, that is just speculation from the source analysis. We aren't taking a stance on that.
We are just reporting what the analysts flagged, but the broader implication is undeniable. The fact that Epstein is typing this out proves he was actively cataloging the compromised, illicit behavior of his powerful peers.
He was building a database of leverage.
Precisely. He wasn't just observing their hypocrisy with amusement. He was documenting it as a tool.
Which connects directly back to the hidden cameras. If he knows for a fact that you threatened to push your wife down the stairs and he can prove you were on his island, he owns you.
He becomes the central node of control.
There's one more email fragment I want to unpack before we move to the network itself. The Larry Summers one.
Ah, yes, the correspondence regarding J.P. Morgan.
Yeah, so there's an email discussing an upcoming meeting involving Larry Summers and J.P. Morgan executives. And Epstein suddenly writes, and I quote, "I am feeling peculiar and going to have to eat something."
And he follows it up by asking, do you want me to call at home in half hour?
Who talks like that? I'm feeling peculiar. And why does the act of eating something necessitate calling home in 30 minutes?
It is highly irregular phrasing for a standard business email regarding a major bank.
Right.
Placed in the context of the jerky code, analysts suggest eating might refer to something else entirely.
Something illicit.
It suggests a transactional nature to his urges. Or perhaps eating is a codified term for initiating a specific type of private meeting or deploying a specific asset.
It really underscores that we are looking at a highly organized group of people who develop their own internal lexicon so they could discuss their crimes in plain sight on corporate servers.
And that lexicon is a hallmark of elite defensive structures.
So we've got the physical evidence, the coded language. Now we have to zoom out and look at the people, the network.
This is where we shift to the bureaucratic and structural debate the listener requested. You cannot understand how this happened without analyzing the architecture of the network itself.
And to do that, the sources say we need to use a very specific theoretical model, right?
Yes.
We shouldn't just look at Epstein as a rich guy who threw good parties.
No, that is a fundamental misunderstanding of his function. Network theory defines Epstein as a broker node.
A broker node. Explain how that works.
A broker node is an entity that connects disparate, isolated clusters of power that otherwise would never interact.
Okay, so like a bridge.
Exactly. Epstein connected the high finance cluster, Wall Street, hedge funds, JP Morgan, with the political cluster, the Clintons, Donald Trump, the Royals.
And he also connected the academic and scientific cluster. Harvard, MIT, scientists.
Precisely. He was the indispensable bridge between all of them.
Which gives him immense, almost incalculable power. If a scientist wants funding from a specific billionaire, they don't just call the billionaire, they have to route through Jeffrey.
And because he controls the bridge, he can extract a toll, often in the form of compromised behavior or leverage. Now, the documents help us map this network by distinguishing between different tiers of contact.
Right, because not everyone in the files is guilty of a crime.
Exactly. First, you have the black book. This is essentially just his Rolodex, thousands of contact info entries. Being in the book simply means he met you or wanted to know how to reach you.
Then you have the flight logs.
The logs indicate proximity. You were actually on the plane, the Lido Express. You traveled within his sphere of influence.
And then the darkest tier, the depositions.
That is where sworn testimony alleges active participation in the abuses.
Let's look at some specific names that generated a ton of headlines when these recent files dropped. Tom Hanks. That was a huge shock to a lot of people.
It was heavily publicized. But this is where forensic reading of the source material is vital. The mention of Hanks actually comes from an email written by a Hollywood publicist, Peggy Segal.
Right. She's asking someone if Tom Hanks is around so she can tell his new movie, Walt Disney, is a big hit.
Correct.
So she's basically just assuming he might be there.
The email does not prove he was present on the island or at the house. It proves that in the professional assessment of a high-level publicist, Tom Hanks fits the demographic profile of Epstein's social circle.
It shows the perceived reach of the network. She figured, oh, it's a room full of powerful people. Tom Hanks is probably there.
Exactly. It maps the social gravity he possessed.
Then you have Woody Allen popping up.
Woody Allen is present in the visual files, including some rather awkward photos of Epstein dressed in what appear to be traditional Mongolian costumes.
Yeah, what was the context of that?
It seems to highlight the bizarre eccentricity of his inner circle, but also the extensive global nature of their travel and social engagements.
But we're talking about global travel. Perhaps the most significant geopolitical revelation in the recent analysis, which I feel like the mainstream media just completely glossed over, is the Indian connection.
It was largely ignored domestically, yes. But our source material from Madan Gowri provides a deep dive into this specific aspect. The unsealed files explicitly mention a request for an Indian girl and discuss coordinating her contact information directly with the embassy.
The actual embassy.
Yes, diplomatic channels.
That is insane.
And Gowri contextualizes this within the broader diplomatic relationship between the United States, Israel, and India during the 2016 to 2020 timeframe.
Right, because there were massive high-level interactions happening between Prime Minister Modi and U.S. and Israeli leadership during that exact window.
The files also casually mention counseling sessions being offered in India.
And given what we know about the Jerky Code, counseling sessions does not mean therapy.
No, the language is heavily loaded. The strategic implication here is massive. It suggests Epstein's network was not merely functioning for the personal, depraved pleasure of a few billionaires.
It was functioning as a covert lubricant for high-level international diplomacy.
If you can successfully compromise, entertain, or fulfill the illicit desires of foreign diplomats and world leaders, you instantly become an essential, protected asset of statecraft.
That is absolutely terrifying, because it completely shifts the narrative from creepy billionaire on an island to literal shadow diplomacy. He was running a geopolitical honeypot.
And when you operate at that level, the intelligence community has a vested interest in your continued operation.
We can't talk about statecraft without talking about the royal connection.
Prince Andrew's presence permeates the files.
But there was one very specific chilling detail that stood out in the visual analysis regarding the royals and the girls, the trackers.
The wristbands, yes. In several photos recovered from the properties, photos featuring young women, and even some featuring Prince Andrew, visual analysts noted strange devices on their wrists.
And look, some people say, oh, they're just fitness trackers or bulky watches,
But given the context of the youth schedules and the pervasive hidden cameras, many security analysts argue they appear to be active tracking devices.
which completely aligns with the surveillance state theory. He was digitally tagging his human assets.
He was monitoring their precise movement across his properties, and the architecture of Little St. James itself reflects this obsession with control and concealment.
Yeah, let's talk about the island's architecture. Dr. G did an analysis of the temple.
The infamous square building with the gold dome and blue stripes.
Everyone has seen aerial drone footage of that thing. It looked so ominous. What was actually inside it?
According to the analysis of the unsealed files, inside the temple there was essentially nothing but 2 mattresses.
No weird statues, no altars, no gym equipment, just mattresses.
Just a staging ground. But even more revealing were the architectural blueprints recovered for the main living areas.
The hidden stairs.
The plans revealed elaborate hidden staircases and actual trapdoors constructed near the pool and the primary living quarters.
Trapdoors. Like a literal cartoon villain.
It sounds absurd until you realize the utility. If you are running an illicit operation with highly recognizable global figures and law enforcement or unwanted guests arrive...
You need to be able to move people or evidence out of sight instantaneously.
Exactly. It physically reinforces the reality that the entire island was not a vacation home. It was a custom-built stage set designed explicitly for entrapment, abuse, and evasion.
Okay, so we've mapped the network. It's massive, it's globally connected, it's architecturally defended, and it has leverage over everyone.
It is a fortress.
And yet, despite all of that, Epstein actually gets arrested in 2008. And then the justice system just completely breaks down.
This brings us to the core of the bureaucratic debate. How did a system designed to prosecute criminals fail so spectacularly?
To really understand the systemic failure, the source material breaks it down into 4 distinct layers. Let's go through them. Layer 1, the original sin.
The 2008 Non-Prosecution Agreement, or NPA, in Florida. This is where the timeline of institutional rot truly becomes undeniable.
Because federal prosecutors had him dead to rights. They had enough evidence to put him in a supermax for the rest of his natural life.
But instead of pursuing that slam-dunk federal case, they negotiated an unprecedented deal where he pled guilty to 2 minor state prostitution charges.
And the punishment was a joke. He got work release.
He was literally allowed to leave the county jail 6 days a week for up to 12 hours a day to go to his private office and conduct business.
It was a hotel stay. It wasn't incarceration. But the true bureaucratic failure, the original sin, was prosecutorial discretion.
The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida at the time, Alex Acosta, made a unilateral discretionary choice to shut the federal investigation down.
And the sources note that they completely kept the victims in the dark.
They did not notify the victims of the plea deal, which a federal judge later ruled was a direct violation of the Crime Victims' Rights Act.
But why? From a bureaucratic standpoint, why would an ambitious federal prosecutor throw away the case of a lifetime?
Years later, when Acosta was questioned during his confirmation hearings for Secretary of Labor, he reportedly claimed she was told to back off because Epstein, quote, belonged to intelligence.
Which, if true, confirms the shadow diplomacy theory.
Whether it was actual intelligence community interference or simply raw financial intimidation, it clearly demonstrates the second layer of failure: elite social shielding.
This is the concept that vast wealth isn't just about buying nice things. It acts as a literal, structural, legal force field.
Exactly. Wealth at that scale provides a structural legal advantage that the justice system simply isn't equipped to fight.
It buys endless procedural delays. It buys armies of white-shoe lawyers who can completely bury a district attorney's office in discovery paperwork.
But most importantly, it buys access. Epstein did not fight the 2008 charges to win a trial in front of a jury.
No, he treated it like a corporate merger. He negotiated a settlement.
He applied a ruthless business tactic to the criminal justice system. He traded a fraction of his political and social capital for his continued survival.
He essentially bought his way out, and the system let him. Which brings us to layer 3, the carceral system failure in 2019.
The federal lockup in New York.
Right, he gets arrested again, the pressure's too high, they can't let him out, he's in federal custody, and then he dies. The official report says suicide.
The Inspector General's report detailing his death is an absolute masterclass in catastrophic institutional incompetence.
It's staggering.
The report cites severe staffing shortages, crucial security cameras malfunctioning on his specific cell block.
2 guards allegedly sleeping on the job, browsing the internet, and then blatantly falsifying the official logbooks to say they did their rounds.
Yeah.
It is almost too perfect, isn't it? Like, oops, the camera's broken, everyone fell asleep at the exact moment. The most high-value, heavily compromised prisoner in the history of the world decided to end his life.
It practically begs for conspiracy theories. However, even if you accept the official ruling of suicide without any foul play, it represents a total collapse of the carceral system.
Oh, totally. If the United States federal prison system cannot manage to keep the single most important witness in the world alive in a highly secure facility, then the system is functional broken.
It exposes a massive vulnerability in state control, which leads us to the theoretical framework that ties all this together. The listener specifically asked us to analyze the concept of defensive power.
Right, this comes from an academic paper by a researcher named Salverda. Can you break this concept down for us?
It's a highly revealing framework. Usually when we think of elite power, we think of power over.
Proactive power.
Yes, elites making laws, commanding armies, dictating economic policy. But Salverda argues that elites are actually most unified and most effective when they are deploying defensive power.
So using their power merely to protect the status quo.
Exactly. When an elite structure is genuinely threatened, like the moment Epstein was arrested and his hard drives were seized, they do not necessarily attack, they freeze, and they fortify.
They circle the wagons?
They deploy all their collective resources simply to maintain their current position and prevent a cascade of exposure.
So Epstein's 2008 sweetheart deal wasn't about him proving his innocence. It was a calculated defensive maneuver to maintain the structural integrity of the network.
Precisely. And what happened when the files finally started leaking?
Absolute panic.
It triggered what network theorists call reputation spillover. When a central broker node collapses, the peripheral nodes, everyone in that black book panics simultaneously.
They scrambled to distance themselves. Every PR firm in Hollywood and D.C. was working overtime.
And this collective, desperate scrambling creates a massive, impenetrable defensive wall. Everyone stops talking. Everyone hires separate legal counsel.
Everyone suddenly says, oh, I barely knew him. I only took one flight for a charity event.
And the legal system, consciously or unconsciously, aids in this. The system prioritizes legal containment.
Meaning, the goal of the Justice Department isn't actually to maximize truth or uncover every crime.
The goal is to stop the infection from spreading to other vital nodes. They want to contain the damage to Epstein and Maxwell, seal the rest of the documents, and protect the broader establishment. That is defensive power in action.
That is deeply cynical, but it connects perfectly to the bigger picture segment of our dive today. We have to look at a report from International IDEA.
The report on democratic backsliding?
Right. Usually when we hear the term democratic backsliding, we think of, I don't know, failing states or military coups. But this report suggests the U.S. response to the Epstein case exhibits the exact same symptoms.
It is a very sobering comparative lens. The report specifically analyzes Asian democratic backsliding, looking at countries like Indonesia or Thailand, where democratic institutions are slowly hollowed out from within.
And it draws direct parallels to the U.S. justice system's handling of Epstein. One of the main parallels is judicial capture.
Yes. In backsliding regimes, the courts are no longer independent arbiters of truth. They are captured tools used by the elite to protect themselves.
Look at the 2008 NPA deal. That is textbook judicial capture. The federal prosecutor essentially aligned with the defendant's legal team against the victims.
They weaponize legal complexity to shield the powerful. Another massive parallel is the control of information.
Right. In an authoritarian regime, they just pass a fake news law or literally shut down the internet to stop a scandal.
In the United States, we use more sophisticated methods of information flow control. We see judges sealing thousands of pages of documents.
We see the use of John Doe pseudonyms to protect the identities of highly powerful men who were named by victims.
It is fundamentally the same mechanism, restricting the public's access to the truth in order to protect the stability of the ruling class.
And the IDEA report mentions this concept that I thought was just brilliant, the resilience conundrum.
It describes a brutal catch-22.
Right. We want to fix the system, the public is outraged and demands accountability.
But the institutions formally charged with fixing the system, the Department of Justice, the FBI, the federal courts, are the exact same institutions that failed in the first place.
How do you mandate reform when the architects of the failure are the ones writing the reform bills. It's asking the fox to install a better lock on the henhouse.
It makes true reform incredibly difficult to achieve from within the existing bureaucracy.
So we have to ask, where does this actually leave us? We promised the listener a true bureaucratic debate and some concrete predictions. Based on all these unsealed files, the network analysis, the defensive power theories, what happens next?
Well, looking purely at the data sources, the consensus is that we are currently only looking at the tip of the iceberg.
You're talking about the MP4 hack.
Yes. There was a highly revealing technical detail buried in the Trapmore-Ross transcript. When the latest batch of court documents was released to the public, they were ostensibly just standard PDF text files.
But internet sleuths started messing with the raw data.
Independent researchers discovered that if they manually changed the file extension of certain release documents from PDF to MP4, a video format, it suddenly revealed hidden embedded video clicks.
Wait, seriously? The courts accidentally embedded video files inside text PDFs.
It strongly suggests that the data dump was technologically messy, or perhaps hastily redacted by clerks who didn't understand the file metadata.
But more importantly, it implies there are massive terabytes of raw, data-hidden surveillance videos, unredacted logs, that have absolutely not been released to the public.
And likely never will be, if the system can prevent it.
So are we ever going to see the mass arrests that the internet is always predicting? Is the FBI going to round up everyone in the black book?
The analytical sources are highly skeptical of that outcome. Based on the text analysis of institutional behavior, the predictable outcome is not a massive sweep of elite arrests.
Because the system prioritizes legal containment.
Exactly. They prioritize brand damage control over truth maximization. The state does not want to destabilize its own financial and political clusters.
So what do we get instead?
We will likely see what the International IDEA Report terms a democratic shell.
A democratic shell. That sounds incredibly bleak.
It is a performative measure. The investigation will continue, technically. It looks like justice from the outside. There are congressional hearings. There are dense inspector general reports. Politicians wear suits and bang gavels on television.
But the core outcome, actually holding the high-level enablers and the peripheral nodes accountable, never materializes.
The shell of a democratic justice system remains visible to the public, but the inside has been completely emptied of consequence.
Wow, that is deeply depressing.
However, the sources do not leave us entirely without agency. There are specific corrective measures and precautions proposed.
Okay, good. Give us some hope. How do we actually fix a system this compromised?
First, on a legislative level, there is the push for the Transparency Act. Specifically, H.R. 4405, the Epstein Files Transparency Act.
This is the bill trying to legally mandate the unsealing of everything, right?
Yes. It is a push to strip the courts of their discretionary power to seal these specific documents. No more John Does.
Because sunlight is always the best disinfectant. If the public can see the network loses its shadow power.
Furthermore, we can apply the 6 Bs of institutional resilience outlined in the IDEA report directly to the U.S. justice system.
Let's run through those. What's the first one?
Blocking bad laws and deals. We fundamentally need legislation that prevents secret, non-prosecution agreements.
Right. An ambitious prosecutor shouldn't be able to just cut a backroom deal with a billionaire's lawyers. A federal judge should have to sign off on every MPA in a public forum with mandatory input from the victims.
Exactly. The second B is broadening the office.
Meaning you reduce the power of a single individual.
Correct. Do not allow a single U.S. attorney, like Acosta, or a single prison warden, to have total unchecked discretion over cases involving high net worth individuals. Diffuse that power.
So if a case involves someone with a net worth over $1 billion or significant political ties, maybe it automatically triggers a mandatory panel of prosecutors from different districts.
Or mandatory oversight from an independent civilian board. And finally, the concept of blindfolding the backslider.
That's an interesting phrase. What does that mean in practice?
It means introducing systemic unpredictability. Elites utilize defensive power so effectively because they know exactly how to game the system. They know which judge is sympathetic. They know which prosecutor wants a job at their law firm in 5 years.
So you have to blindfold them. You randomize the process.
If you randomize judicial assignments and prosecutorial oversight for these elite cases, you make it infinitely harder for the broker nodes network to find a corruptible grip on the machinery.
You break their ability to predict the outcome.
Precisely.
So bring it all together. What is the final ultimate prediction from the expert? When the history books are written about this massive, sprawling disaster 20 years from now, how does it end?
Based on the structural analysis, I believe the final result of the investigation will be a masterclass in the institutional diffusion of responsibility.
The diffusion of responsibility, meaning everyone points the finger at someone else.
Meaning the system will ultimately blame the system itself. They will cite bureaucratic error. They will blame the low-level guards who fell asleep on shift.
They'll blame outdated camera software. They'll blame the legal culture of 2008.
Exactly. They will blame everything except the high-level enablers. They will point to 1,000 tiny failures to avoid indicting the overarching power structure. The central broker node is gone, but the network itself remains completely intact and heavily defended.
That is heavy.
Well.
It's a heavy realization. But it brings us to the end of our deep dive today, and we always try to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought, something to chew on that builds on everything we've uncovered.
We spent a lot of time today talking about the bizarre, shocking details, the jerky code, the bells, the hidden rooms.
But honestly, the real horror of this entire story is the boring stuff. The procedural plea deals, the heavily redacted PDFs.
The quiet meetings between lawyers.
Right, the banality of it all. It's the horrific realization that this system didn't actually break down. The system worked exactly as it was designed to work, to protect capital and shield the powerful.
And my final thought builds on that network theory.
Let's hear it.
We established that Epstein was the ultimate broker node. He was the indispensable bridge connecting finance, politics, and the science.
And now he is gone.
But nature abhors a vacuum, and so do power structures. The immense demand for that connection, for that covert lubricant between these elite worlds, did not simply evaporate because Jeffrey Epstein died in a cell.
Oh, wow.
The desire for shadow diplomacy and compromise leverage still exists. So the ultimate question is, who or what institution has quietly stepped in to replace him? Who is the new broker node?
That is chilling. And it ties perfectly into the defensive power concept. Have we actually finally seen the unvarnished truth with these unsealed files? Or have we only seen exactly what the elite structures allowed to slip through the cracks?
Have they simply fed us just enough scandal and bizarre details to satisfy the public's hunger for a resolution while ensuring the core architecture of their power remains entirely untouched?
That is the question you need to ask yourself. And we'd encourage you, the next time a headline drops about this case, or the next time a new document is unsealed, don't just look at the famous names.
Look past the celebrities.
Look at the structure. Look at the bureaucracy. Look at who is redacting the files and who is signing the plea deals. Because that is where the real machinery of power operates.
That is where the real story always is.
This has been an incredibly intense deep dive. Thank you for sticking with us through it. We will catch you next time.